Good evening. My name is Vince Noblett, President of Speedway Redevelopment Commission. Today is July 18th, Monday. It's a regular session of the Speedway Redevelopment Commission. First off, I want to start off with a roll call. Ron Fisher.
Here.
Allison Duncan.
Here.
Bill Jones.
Here.
Dr. Terry Reed.
Here.
Also in attendance is our attorney, Jim Gutting.
Evening.
And Tim Jensen is in attendance tonight, too. In the audience is Councilor Gary Rakes and Vice President Jeff Matthews. Thanks for coming. Tonight, also on the is Ian in attendance is Ian Nicolini, the town manager. Let's move on and for approval of June 27th regular session minutes. These minutes have been distributed to Council. Any corrections or changes? If not, they'll be approved as submitted. Hearing none, they're approved. Next is the approval of July 8th. It was a joint executive session. These minutes have been previously submitted. There's no changes or corrections that will be approved as submitted. None, they're approved. Next, I'd like to ask anybody in the audience that would like to speak to the commission tonight, please step forward and state your name and address the commission.
My name is Charles Bennett, 4934 West 15th Street. Here just representing myself and my family tonight. Tried to make it back to the June meeting because I wanted to make sure that I came back after I approached the commission in May. And thanks to Mr. Nicolini for finally getting me on the distribution list, because I know last month was kind of a ragtag deal where we moved meetings around and couldn't find it updated on the website. So thanks for him for getting me that information. But I also wanted to make sure that I just responded to the commission as well, because I spent probably, a half an hour, Mr. Nicolini, after the May meeting?
I'm sorry.
We spent probably a half an hour after the May meeting.
Yeah, we had a substantive conversation.
In the conversation, so I didn't know if I had not quite made my point clear, or, and again, I wasn't objecting to anything besides the fact that I just wanted to point out the history of where I live, the fact that I'm 600 feet from all the development going on, the ULI study, the master plan, the economic impact analysis, and all of those things. And Ian showed me a picture on his phone of what was proposed to go in there, I think, in 2005. And so it kind of hit me with the whole Wilcox project and the Rosner project, and then I saw Vince's comments about having the Rosner building still there with character, diamond in the rough. And so one of my objections was that initially when the plan came out, I mean, the master plan drawing showed the roundabout at 16th and Lyndhurst with the Rosner building gone, most of those buildings torn down. There was a large screen TV. This was not the development that I wanted 600 feet from my house, nor would I really would like to see Main Street turn into, because we'd lose the diamonds in the rough, or we'd lose our character or our development. So I just wanted to make sure that I got back up and just wanted to say that, because I don't want to lose those things, and I didn't want that in my neighborhood or just down from me. And still following everything that's been done with the commission, with all the studies, and then the hotel going in, that was my main objection. So I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that. It was not against, it was not an attack on the commission, it was none of that. But once Ian showed me that, and then Vince made those comments, that's exactly what I was pushing for. And I know you even said that you may go back and do some more studies, figure out what's going on. But I've always tried to help this commission by giving you information on what you can do with facade grants, items that you can get to preserve that historic district. Again, walked with Chad Lethick from the Indiana Historical Landmarks and Scott to keep those buildings down there and maintain that character that we've all talked about. So I just wanted to make sure that I got back. I didn't have a chance the last meeting, but wanted to do that. And then the last thing is something maybe you guys can help me with. I'm not sure, but I know that they're way back. I'm always concerned with parking of businesses in the neighborhood, and the fact that I know we've already got a variance for the Big Woods to tear down the house and put a parking lot, and the commission owns property in which they've taken down a house. But now just down the street from me in the alley, there's a business that has cars parking in his yard. And so I know way back when the variance hearing was held in 2010, there was actually a temporary variance granted so that he could have cars parked there to help out the commission. There were two other neighbors that were also allowed to park cars there because of all the infrastructure work you were doing. And now there's still cars being parked there. I did contact the code enforcement because I know they put several articles in the paper about people parking in the yards, and he said that nothing to his knowledge had been passed for variances and those things. So I just want to make sure that I've always been on record as against putting parking lots in neighborhoods, especially for businesses. I know we had a plan, so I don't know if there's any way that maybe something's been passed and I just missed it, or there was a variance that was passed and I missed it. So if there is, it'd be great to know. If not, maybe we can look into it.
Get
and see.
with Ian afterwards and let us know exactly where that is.
Okay.
Where you're talking about,
Okay.
so you clarify that.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Go right ahead. Just state your name and
Dan
Where you with?
Dan Klausner from Paradigm Development. Just wanted to make myself, no particular comments, just wanted to make myself available, as I know we're on the agenda tonight, for any questions, concerns, or issues surrounding prior or existing or future anticipated projects. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else would like to speak to the commission tonight, please step forward. Seeing none, I'm going to move on. Next on the agenda is a resolution of the Town of Speedway Redevelopment Commission authorizing the execution of an amendment to the lease between the Town of Speedway Redevelopment Authority and the Town of Speedway Redevelopment Commission in relation to, Ian, can you go over that?
Sure, happy to. In and of itself, Mr. President, the resolution is a fairly ministerial act. Indiana Code contemplates that redevelopment commissions and redevelopment authorities can finance major capital projects utilizing leases of public property or grounds owned by the redevelopment authority or the redevelopment commission. However, any time that the conditions or terms related to the bonds sold that are paid from those lease proceeds are altered, typically requires an amendment to the lease document itself. But if I may, Mr. President, I'd like to take a couple minutes and just talk about what this is, where this project came from, prior to you guys considering acting on the resolution itself.
Absolutely.
So at the beginning of the year, myself, bond counsel Jim Gutting with Barnes and Thornburg, and the consultants at London Witty took a pretty close look at all of our existing redevelopment authority and redevelopment commission debt, and wanted to see if there were opportunities, and I've had a chance to brief you guys on this over time, if there were opportunities to refund or refinance any of that debt, or if there were additional opportunities to create savings or funds that could be used for other redevelopment projects within the area. And so really, we've identified three areas that we're recommending action on, and in fact, the Redevelopment Authority at their 5 o'clock meeting earlier today had approved. The 2009 Series A 1 and 2 bonds. Now, there's a taxable portion and a tax-exempt portion of those bonds. Those bonds actually have an interest rate, have an effective interest rate in the 6% range, which, you know, the market's bearing somewhere closer to 3 now. So there's a much more advantageous interest rate position there. And also, that fund has what's called a debt service reserve fund. A debt service reserve fund is essentially 1 year's worth of payments that are taken out of the bond proceeds and really held to kind of be the last payment on the bonds 25, 30 years down the road. As you might imagine, though, an annual payment on a bonds that's in cash but locked up in a bank account and unable to be used for the project fund that the bonds were issued for has a pretty significant impact, not only on the size of the financing, but on the amount of debt service anyway. You're making annual payments against that every year. And so Jim and Bob Swintz and Jennifer at London Witty have identified an entity that will essentially take out an insurance policy. It's called a surety bond, surety policy against that debt service reserve fund. So somewhere 2 to 3% of the amount of the bond, or of the debt service reserve fund, they'll give you an insurance policy that frees up that is in the form of cash for a number of uses. For the 2009 Series A bonds, between the interest savings and the debt service reserve surety, it has a net present value savings of a little over $1.1 million. And what we would propose to do is use that to pay down debt so that our debt service payment on an annual basis for the duration of those bonds goes down about $155,000 a year. 155, 150, 160, depending on the year. So it increases our coverage ratio, makes our bond or our credit worthiness more desirable, makes it easier to make those payments. The 2010 bonds are actually Build America bonds, which include a federal subsidy on the interest rate, which means you pay a higher interest rate, but some of that is paid by the federal government. So those bonds didn't have a call provision, so we could not refinance them at a lower interest rate. They're not structured in such a way that would allow it. However, there's about a almost $1.4 million debt service reserve fund. We think that it's appropriate to convert that to a surety policy as well. We have a 800-foot stretch of 72-inch sewer that we didn't get to in the first phase of the project that we could replace with the savings from the surety.
And that is between Main Street?
Yeah, from Main Street to Allison,
Right.
roughly. There's a 90-plus-year-old section of sewer that's kind of replaced on both ends of it. There's an older piece in the middle. This gives us the opportunity to replace that. It's underneath, and the scope of that project includes some alternates as well. The B&O trail could be built on top of it because that's essentially where the sewer will be located. And also looking at what we can do for additional parallel or on-street parking options with Allison and Gilman. So those are alternates. Really, the sewer is the primary focus. But if we get advantageous pricing, we want to know what those numbers come back with. So this savings can be used for some pretty significant infrastructure that really you couldn't use the savings for anything other than the intended stated purpose of those bonds, which happened to be to construct Allison, Gilman, and doing that sewer work as well.
Do you know how many additional parking spaces that would affect?
Well, I think if you,
Ballpark?
yeah, it's, Gilman would get about 23 and about 24 to 25 on Allison. Problem with Allison is you'd probably want to light it because you won't have any ambient lighting because the east side's not developed.
Right.
So we did include a lighting component for that as well. Typically, the trails close at dusk, so if you're going to convey people that far over, you'd have to look at this as a slightly larger project. We'll see what the prices come back, but
good.
you'd end up with about 23 on Gilman, and I think that's a fairly reasonable number and hopefully something that we'll be able to fund. Got to wait until we see pricing. And then lastly, the 2015 Series A bonds, those have a very advantageous interest rate. It's in the 3s. No reason to refinance those bonds. However, again, you've got about a $760,000 debt service reserve fund that you could save with a surety policy and use that for projects. We'd still need to identify what that project would be, but essentially the Redevelopment Authority thought that it was wise to take action on all three to give the commission the authority then to amend the lease and sometime between now and September close on these refinancing bonds and realize those savings and reductions in debt service. And Jim, that was about as good as I could do. I'm sure I missed 10 or 12 things. Is there anything?
Excellent. Other than the fact that tonight the approval is just for the form of the lease. We won't know until after we get through the process and actually sell the bonds how much that lease payment will come back down, and we'll end up having to execute that change at some time in the future.
So all in all, I mean, you've got about $3.3 million worth of either direct savings or project funds that can be used for other projects in the district. So a very advantageous refinancing opportunity for us. And I think it was great that we took a holistic look and didn't just say, oh, well, that's got a good interest rate. We don't have to consider anything there. Found some other solutions and opportunities, I think, to take on some additional economic development projects.
Fantastic. So I need a motion in relationship to the resolution, or are you talking about just the form of the lease?
So,
Or, what,
What might be appropriate, Mr. President, I could read it by title only, and then the commission could take action based on the reading.
okay,
And by the way, I have complete documents, red line documents, and everything else if you want to look at it related to these financings. You do have, for signature, a slightly different version than what was in your packet. Nothing affects the deal points, just clarifying some of the language and legalese before we send these off. It's entirely ministerial.
okay.
But I do have everything red lined if you want to look through it.
We give all those to Ron.
Yeah. Yes. He and I will review them at 6 a.m. tomorrow.
Detailed review.
Resolution 2016-02 is a resolution of the Town of Speedway Redevelopment Commission authorizing the execution of an amendment to the lease agreement between the Town of Speedway Redevelopment Authority and the Town of Speedway Redevelopment Commission, and approving certain matters related thereto.
So moved.
Second.
I got a motion and a second in relation to Resolution 2016-2. Is there any discussion, further discussion on this? Hearing none, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of 2016-2 signify by aye.
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 All those opposed, motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Good job.
We got, yeah, no kidding. That's a lot. Next on our agenda is a review of proposal from Browning Development and Paradigm Group, Paradigm Real Estate. RFP for 2500 North High School Road. Jim, do you have a review of that, or what your proposal is on that?
Yeah, we went through the process of reviewing the proposal with Ian and the proposer. It was our determination, and primarily with Tom Pittman's overview, that the proposal does not respond to the RFP. Some of the conditions that were attached to the proposal are not conditions that we anticipated and are restrictive and contrary to what we were looking for. So, having given that, our recommendation would be for you to reject all proposals, although there was just one, and then continue to negotiate after that fact with options.
Okay,
So,
okay.
So moved.
Okay, given that,
Get a motion.
I need a motion
So moved.
and make it.
Is there discussion? 'Cause
No, not.
There's a motion
no.
on the floor.
We got a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I got a motion and a second. Is there currently any discussion concerning the motion and the second?
So by rejecting this proposal allows the commission to continue to negotiate with anybody else in regard to that property. Is that correct?
correct, and/or the people involved
And/or.
with the proposal. Correct.
Okay.
So essentially, this just says you're rejecting the proposal as specifically spelled out in the document,
Correct.
leaving options open. Once 30 days have elapsed from when you received proposals, you can negotiate with anyone.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, I want to call for a vote. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries 4-0. Okay. Next is, we got a review and approval of the roof repair on the Arts Center building. Ian, you submitted, and we got
Yeah.
2 quotes on that.
Mr. President, we solicited 3 quotes. One was non-responsive. The lowest apparent proposal is for $9,450 to replace the flat roof, to repair the membrane on the flat roof of the Arts Center. We've patched it a few times. It's not going to get any better, and when you consider that you have, expensive commissioned piece of arts on walls that could leak, it's wise for us to take necessary steps to replace it. So we wanted to get this proposal to you guys for your consideration before we authorize the work. So the lowest proposal came in at $9,450 from UHQ. We recommend you approve it.
Okay. We got a motion, we have a motion to.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Now, is there any discussion concerning the quote by UHQ Construction, the redoing of the roof of the Art Center?
The lower quote's got 5 more years of warranty, so
Yeah, and I did have a chance to talk to their representative, and he lives here in town, and he's done a lot of work here in town, and he was recommended by our building inspector. So he's going to follow this, so we don't have continual leaks in the Art Center. Got a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor, signify by aye.
aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 4-0.
Who seconded that?
I did.
Rhonda.
Okay, next on the agenda, is there any other business to come before the commission?
I would like to bring up the parking proceeds from this year's Indianapolis 500. The Speedway Redevelopment Commission has in the past allowed community groups to assist with parking vehicles at IMS events. Parking is available on SRC-owned property or on properties that have development agreements which allow SRC-controlled parking on these properties during certain events. This year being the 100th running of the 500, and for the first time in history, the event was completely sold out, and the parking of vehicles in these lots was well received and a valuable resource for those persons or people looking for a place to park. For the first time, proceeds were accurately tallied by shifts and locations, and the money was collected by the town clerk, Monty Combs. We'd like to express our sincere gratitude to Monty and his wife, Betsy, for all the hard work in scheduling volunteers, collecting money, and providing an accurate summary of the money collected. This year's volunteer groups included Montegi, Japan, Sister City, Verano, Italy, Sister City, Speedway Athletics, Speedway Band Music, and Speedway Robotics. In the past, as well as this year, the SRC has donated the proceeds from these parking revenues back to these groups through the Speedway Community Development Commission or Corporation. This will hold true this year as well. I'd like to make a motion that the SRC donate to the CDC the proceeds from the race parking in the following percentages. Montegi 29%, Italy 37%, Athletics 9%, Band Music 11%, and Robotics 2%. I don't have the exact total, but it's somewhere around $100,000 in revenues that were collected for parking. The town clerk has the exact total, minus the expenses is what the net proceeds. These percentages were based on the number of volunteer hours worked from the total hours available for volunteer participation, and I would advise the sister city groups contact their town council liaison to determine the process for disbursement of these funds. So I would make that motion that those funds are donated to the CDC in those percentages.
I would just ask that it's 11.8% on the band.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, 11.8%.
Okay, we got a request,
I
To,
could bump that up to 12 if you'd like. French horn.
you know, Monty.
Let's do easy, let's do even numbers, 12%.
Okay. Do I have a motion? Or do we need a motion? Okay.
He made a motion.
I
Made a motion.
second.
There a second. Is there any other discussion concerning it? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Okay. Next is the approval of claims.
Yeah, I'll move that we will approve the claims as submitted by the clerk treasurer.
Okay, we got a motion.
I'll second.
To approve the claims. We got a second. Motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the claims? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor as the claims submitted by the clerk treasurer, town clerk treasurer, signify by aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, is there anything else to come from the commission tonight?
Mr. President, I can give a few updates on some projects. Tim and I will be meeting with the developer entities from Wilshaw on Wednesday on the third version of the Economic Development Agreement. We're continuing to iron that out and make sure that we're still working within the four corners of our term sheet on a project that's going to be advantageous for the corridor and working on under an agreement that protects the best interests of both parties, the taxpayers and the developer entity. As I mentioned earlier, we're working on pricing on the 72-inch sewer now that we have a means of paying for it. We anticipate having that at the end of July. Work at Juncos and OMR is both progressing. You might have saw our traffic counts out on Main Street last week. We wanted to get kind of a down week, but get it on weekend evenings where you would still get good traffic, but more kind of like a more consistent picture of what traffic levels are like. So they're going to be sorting through that data and getting back with us.
Hopefully not Thursday morning when everybody in the city was on Main Street.
Yeah, it was Thursday night.
Okay, good.
It was Thursday night. It was Friday night. Or it was Thursday for lunch.
I don't know if it cleared out by then, but
Yeah.
It is what it is.
And make them do it again. And then we're going to be meeting with the merchants on Main Street to go over a number of projects and initiatives and updates in a series of 2 meetings between myself and some members of our team and the Chamber of Commerce, kind of meeting with geographic areas of merchants to kind of talk about, opportunities, shared interests, where we can strengthen our partnership. And so those will be taking place mid-August. So the big updates I had for you, Mr. President, unless there's any questions.
The Wilshaw sign that is, we had a hit and run on
Yeah.
and went through there. Could we shorten one side and fill the middle in so that we could?
They're supposed to, so we've got it on our list of things, I followed up with them twice last week about getting it repaired. They just haven't printed the new signs.
I was going to say, just take one off the end.
Well,
Move it down or
Yeah,
whatever.
that would be a logical fix.
With that, because somebody else is going to go through it, I'll guarantee you.
Well, and leaving that open doesn't really hurt us for the time being if you're going to be using the surface parking lot and conveying people over for the Brickyard. Having that as a pass-through is not,
I think it was a pass-through for the 500.
it was for the 500, so,
Somebody just created.
I'm not saying I hit it to do that.
Open it up, clear lane. Now, how far is that building setting back off of the road?
Yeah, I know. Well, hopefully a
Whether we
five,
Put ballards up along the whole front to protect the.
you'll have plenty of barricade along at the street level. Anytime you've got a corner building with no setback, you're going to have bollards and planters
Right.
as a means of making sure that you don't have the ability to plow into the building. Part of the
You know,
design.
That's, one thing I have noticed is this excess of speed in that roundabout. It seems like I don't know if there's a race on or whatever, but especially at 5 o'clock in the morning, people just want to get to work or get home from work, and they come flying through there, from that, literally now.
Maybe some directed enforcement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we can direct some enforcement to that effect.
If there's
do so.
nothing else to come before the commission, it is 6:35. I'm going to call this meeting adjourned.